All right. Hello, everyone. We're just gonna take maybe a few more minutes for people to log in. But we have all the panelists here tuning in. We also have Doug King. He'll be doing some IT issues in the background just for the first 10 minutes or so. And then we also have Chelsea, who will be helping monitor some of the questions and chat box and anything that's coming in as well. So we'll just kind of wait maybe a minute or so for a few more people to join, but hope you're all doing well, and we really appreciate everybody taking the time out to join us this evening, including all the panelists and everybody out there, wherever you're tuning in from. And looks like, yeah. If you have any issues with audio or anything, feel free to put it into the chat box and Doug will help assist you with that. Just wait a little bit longer.
You guys staying hydrated?
Yes, trying to. It's really windy. It's really windy in Flagstaff. So
Windy down here in Bisbee, like the whole state is something's moving.
Okay. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this panel discussion. So if you need to log out, it will be available, and we can do a follow-up email with that information. So I just want to really, again, thank everybody for joining us this evening for this panel discussion, very important panel discussion that was put together in under a week. Thank you to all the panelists, to all the attendees joining. And I just want to get started with just sort of a little broader context of the purpose of this webinar panel discussion. So some of you are probably guides, or you like to hike into the canyon. You've probably driven through maybe the Navajo Reservation, the Hopi Nation, and so we wanted to sort of discuss some of the indigenous people's inherent rights to this greater Grand Canyon region. And it doesn't have to be just in the Grand Canyon. And I think this goes into the larger context of the whole Black Lives Matter movement, Indigenous Lives Matter, that we're seeing recently in the news, and some of the protests happening out there, maybe in your nearby communities. And so now, you know, some statements are coming out, some actions are coming out from different organizations, even bigger organizations, brand companies, you know, saying they support the Black Lives Matter movement. And so we wanted to just sort of start off with that a little bit. But also, you know, when people think about the Grand Canyon, and I'll ask you all in a poll about what you think about when you first visit or hear about the Grand Canyon. We want to get your thoughts on that. So without further ado, I think I want to start us off with introductions. I'll start with myself, and I'll introduce myself in Diné first. Yat e she Colleen Cooley and Nishya Kenya Ani Nishlin Loka Diné Bashichin Twa Heglini a Dashiche Glizafana a Dashanella Kutao a Diné Astan Nishlin do Shant, excuse me, Shant Twaha Dant Ayasanasha, and I would like to pass it on to Amy to do a brief introduction as well.
Thank you so much, Colleen. My name is Amy Martin, and I want to first extend my gratitude to Colleen and Sarana for inviting me to be on this panel. I also want to acknowledge that my voice probably is not the most important voice here today, but I'm very grateful to share what I have learned over the 18 years that I've worked at Grand Canyon in a lot of different capacities. I was a ranger for 6 years. I worked on the river. I've worked as a scientist, and I work as a photographer and a visual storyteller. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Amy. And we'll have some time for all the panelists to also expand on their background and experience within the canyon as well. I'll turn it over to Jewel next.
Hello, I'm going to introduce myself in my language as well. Jo ganije hanke mabajme ngachjo Honga moya. Haksaf bavja hat the gliva yuya. Hello, my name is Jewel Honga. I'm of the Pine Springs Band of Mohawk Canyon. Mohawk Canyon is a branch off the main Grand Canyon. And I come from the tribal community of the Hualapai tribe in Peach Springs, Arizona. I'm also half Navajo, so not Otana and Nishle. Wallabe Bashishchin, Keith Lachini Dashte, Wallabe Dog, Keith Ani Dashanella. Bisa Guy Did Nasha. I'm Tobacco Clam. I'm born for the Hualapai people, and my family comes from White Valley. I spent about 2 years as a river guide, running from Diamond Creek all the way to Pierce Ferry, and it's the best job in the world. I loved it. I want to thank everybody for coming here. I want to thank the ladies for inviting me to join this talk today. And I just want to state that, you know, my views and my opinions and my thoughts are explicitly my own. So it's not on behalf of any tribal organization or my employer. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jewel. And next I will have Raechel introduce herself.
Good afternoon. My name is Raechel Running, and I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona. I am a freelance photographer, currently residing and living down on the borderlands. My mom came from the island of Trinidad and Tobago of Afro-Caribbean and Chinese descent, and my father came from Buffalo, New York, and of French-Canadian, Irish descent. And I've grown up in Grand Canyon since I was a little kid and did my first youth trip as an 11-year-old, and have worked freelance as a guide and cook on numerous biology trips and also commercially. So it's really an honor to be here to help bring perspective for people of color in this industry and in the place that we call home, and to also thank all of the tribes for allowing their home to be our home.
Great. Thank you, Raechel, for joining us this evening. Next, I'll go with Nikki Shade.
Yat Shdeja. Yat Nikki Cooley Dashijine. Kenya on in Nishla do look at the Nabashichin. Tlizafana a Dashanala to a head, Lini a Dashiche. Shot for that door bestowed is the skis the in Nasha, or what our the son in Nishle. So I'm born for the, I'm of the Townhouse clan, born for the Reed People clan. Maternal grandfather is from the water that flows together. Paternal is from the Many Goats clan. And I live here in Flagstaff, Arizona with my husband. We are both recovering river guides. I was a river guide for a long time, and I worked for mostly Arizona Raft Adventures, but I also did a lot of trips on the San Juan River for a long time. And right now I work on climate change issues with tribes. So that's my other life and whatnot. So, and I'm a mother of 2 children. Well, Colin's helping me raise them. So our children are 9 and 6 years old. And my husband's also a nurse at the hospital. So I'll pass it on.
All right. Next, I'll go with Lynn. If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Hamilton. I'm the Executive Director of Grand Canyon River Guides here in Flagstaff. We're a nonprofit educational and environmental organization that was formed over 30 years ago to provide river guides and the collective river running public with a collective voice in protection of Grand Canyon. And so it's been my distinct privilege to work for Grand Canyon River Guides and on behalf of Grand Canyon since 1995, a long time, good portion of my life. And it's just really an honor to be here. You know, GCRG has always wanted to help amplify and take into consideration tribal concerns and perspectives. And, you know, I really am so anxious to listen and learn as well. And as I'm sure everybody on this Zoom panel discussion wants to do as well. And I should mention too that my board, well, a good portion of them, some of them may be on this call, the others are on the river right now. I think the majority of them are. And so, so the views articulated here should not be considered like policy directions and that kind of thing, because especially with these recent developments, none of my board, or most of my board, has been gone. So we haven't had the opportunity to have these important discussions. But all of this is incredibly important to us, and we're really thankful for Sarana and Colleen for putting this together, and thank you for including us.
Thank you, Lynn, for that. And Sarana, I think she's calling in on the line. If she can introduce herself, and then we'll follow with Jack after that. Oh, hi.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I just want to say thank you for, for the panelists being here. And I'm looking forward to the discussion here today. Thank you, Colleen, for being a really good friend and hosting this panel here. And I want to thank everybody that's online right now. And thank you for showing up. I'm not going to be speaking today. I have a family emergency that I'm dealing with. And I really wish I could speak, but Jack, who's one of the panelists, will be speaking on behalf of the work that we'll be doing. So I'm from the Navajo tribe. I'm from an area called Big Mountain. I'm Diné, which is Cherokee Apache, and Lizatlana is my dad. Ashihi is my grandpa, and Todachini is my Nelly. So that's how I would introduce myself. And I just wanted to say again, thank you. And I really appreciate everybody being here for this discussion.
Thank you, Sarana, for joining and showing your face for a little bit. Nice to see you. I'll turn it over to Jack.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jack Pongyesva. I'm a Hopi tribal member from Third Mesa, Hopeville. I also grew up in Oak Creek Canyon, just south of Flag. So I am of the Pepuungwa, which is the Tobacco Clan, and then Tapuungwa, which is the Rabbit Clan. And yeah, happy to be here, filling in for Sarana graciously. I was asked to be on this panel, and yeah, honored to be here. Really think it's an important message, and yeah, excited to talk to you all.
Great, awesome, thank you. Well, thank you all for your introductions. And again, we'll have a little bit more time where they can all elaborate on their backgrounds and their experience out there. So next, I want to see other people, who the audience is. So I'm gonna have a poll come up right now, so you guys can answer that if you can. Just to kind of see who our audience is out there. And you all should be able to see as well. Yeah, awesome. Looks like it's going. And again, we have a chat box and also a Q&A box. If you're tuning in on your computer, that's at the bottom section of the toolbar. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in. We'll try to get to them, and we'll try to get to some of it also throughout the panel, and some of it as well at the end of the panel. So looks like we got a lot of educators tuning in. I'll give it a few more seconds. in the poll, and then we can share the results so you guys can all see as well who's tuning in. Looks like we have a lot of educators, community members, a few tribal members, students, scientists, and some raft guides on the line. So thank you all for joining us and tuning in to this important discussion. And so we have a few more questions we'll pull up in a little bit, but I will close that out right now. I wanted to start off with asking a question to the panelists about what is your experience, what is your connection to the Grand Canyon, the greater Grand Canyon region? You can tell it from a story from when you first visited the canyon, or maybe when you were first introduced to this place, or you can provide it from whatever perspective and background that has brought you to this place. And I know a lot of people out there would love to see this amazing place that is known as the Seven Wonders of the World out there for people that come in from so many different places. So I wanted to start off with that as a question to the panelists, just to see a little bit more about how you all connect to the canyon. So I'm going to start off again with Amy.
Thanks so much again. I would say that my relationship with Grand Canyon started when I was actually in my mother's womb. So she hiked me into the canyon when she was pregnant with me. And then again, when I was very little, about 6 months old. So I feel like there's something there. I definitely do not have this long history as many of you do, but I have it short just within my lifetime history of knowing and loving Grand Canyon. And I started working there in my early 20s, so in the early 2000s, and have tried to leave many times. And I leave, I dream about it, and I crawl back to it. And so that is what, you know, really has formed the trajectory of my life and my relationship. 18 years now working at Grand Canyon. So I would say that would be the significant moments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Jewel.
Okay, sorry, I had to find the mute button there. My relationship with the Grand Canyon, well, you know, obviously when I stated in my introduction that I am of the Pine Springs Band of Mohawk Canyon, I have a direct connection to this land. And it started when my great-great-grandfather, Indian Honga, he was originally Paiute, and before the river was dammed, he would cross over from the northern side to the southern side. And that's where he found a Hualapai woman, my great-great-grandmother, and started a family. And that's where my Hualapai lineage started. Mohawk Canyon, Hualapai is a patriarchal society, so you get your bands from your father. My father is from Mohawk Canyon, and it's, I didn't say earlier that I am an enrolled Hualapai tribal member, and I lived on the reservation for about 10 years as a child. And in the community of Peach Springs, you know, it's a small town on Route 66. A lot of the businesses there, one of Hualapai's first successful business entity was river running. And we started back in about 1976. And I have a lot of river runners in my family. You know, and for me, John Wesley Powell wasn't my hero. Georgie White wasn't my hero. My hero for me, or what got me into river running, was my Auntie Lana, my uncle Junior, Danny Lee Jr., and his father, Danny Lee Sr. And they were some early, you know, Hualapai river runners. And for me, growing up, you know, in Peach Springs, Colorado River was just 20 miles down the road. That's where I first learned how to swim. And in Hualapai country, you know, you can drive out to the rim and it's beautiful, and it's one of a kind experience. And for the canyon to be there, you know, right in our backyard is amazing. It really is. And, you know, when we talk to the elders, to the Hualapai elders, you know, they tell us all the time that, you know, the Grand Canyon is sacred. The water is what sustained us and protected us. The canyon, you know, when we were rounded up and taken down to La Paz, you know, which is essentially, you know, our Trail of Tears, the canyon saved us. You know, we were able to go deep into the canyon, and while the cavalry was searching for those, you know, who had gone into the canyon, they say that we essentially blended in with the canyon. We could stand against the walls and blend in with the canyon and watch the cavalry walk, you know, on the canyon floor. And so the canyon and all its surroundings is everything to us. The Hualapai people and all the tribes who have the traditional lands surrounding the Grand Canyon. And I'm very proud to say that I am Hualapai, and that is my home, my ancestral home. And it needs to be protected, and we will protect it as long as, you know, generations to come. We're, you know, essentially we're still here. So, but being a river guide, being a female river guide, you know, was a hard thing. And it's an experience I loved. I still love it. I look forward to the day when I come back to it. But until then, you know, there's other work that needs to be done. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your story on your Hualapai side, and always support female river guides. But before we move on, we have another poll I wanted to ask as well. So the question revolves around what people think about when they first hear about the Grand Canyon, just because you had mentioned John Wesley Powell. So if you all can take that poll next before we move forward into other panelists answering the question. Yeah, so what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about the Grand Canyon? So that's the question. If you're not able to tune in by the computer, but this is for people calling in with their phones. And so we have people responding highly to the geological features at about 40% of the audience. The next would be Indigenous peoples at 33% right now. All right, I'm gonna close it out and share the results for everybody. So there it is. So that's what we can see as your answers to the question. Wow. I'm surprised it's only 1% for John Wesley Powell, because my experience from other people, maybe it's visitors from internationally or other parts of the US where that's what people think about. So that's one of the reasoning why we have this discussion as well. Besides these amazing features of the canyon and how old it is, we want to touch on, you know, the Indigenous peoples that continue to inhabit this region and any issues as well. So there you have it. So I will continue on and have Raechel talk about her connection to the Grand Canyon.
Can you hear me now? Let's see, wait. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I grew up with my family members doing a lot of photo documentary in Grand Canyon. So I ended up kind of going there as a baby with people coming in from different parts of the country to watching and saying hello, you know, goodbye to my dad as he went down the river. So we first started going to Lee's Ferry probably when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And was one of the first kids at the age of 11, which is 44 years ago, for a 21-day youth trip. And I think that trip really has always been a cornerstone as a little kid, because a lot of the boatmen were scientists and people who we looked up to, and people who worked at the Museum of Northern Arizona. And also, I kind of grew up with going to the museums and to a lot of our heritage sites throughout Arizona. And again, thanks to my parents being interested in the regional cultures. And myself, I probably started working down in the canyon part-time during the 89, 90 in the Summer of Science. So that was an experience working with lots of different people, the commercial river guides, and also some of the tribal peoples and representatives and people who were stewards of the canyon beyond the summer season, where we kind of took care of the canyon and took care of the sites, and as a way of having park and people and tribes coming together to kind of learn a new language of protocol and working together. I was also able to work with Grand Canyon youth, with also the Hualapai people, and when they ran summer camps back in the earlier days, which I think was actually really important. And then attended some of the more modern or contemporary Grand Canyon youth trips with all of the Indigenous students, and my former partner Shanto as an arts educator, and then also as a river guide working with kids, taking kids who were back in school. And so kind of kids who were kind of came from challenging backgrounds to kids who were did well in school, and kind of all put together on another river trip, which had some interesting results. So I feel my role in here is to also listen and learn, and to advocate for more diversity within our community. I'm always championing somebody to kind of join the Grand Canyon Youth. And the latest was like the last 2 years of getting kids from the Tohono O'odham Nation to come on their second year of Grand Canyon Youth for their participation.
Wow. Thank you for that, Raechel. I will turn it over to Lynn next.
Alrighty. Well, when I moved here with my husband and 2 small children, aged 1 and 3, in 1995, we didn't even have jobs. Kind of a leap of faith. But I connected with an old friend from Berkeley, Kelly Burke, who is the director of the Grand Canyon Wildlands Council. She in turn, introduced me to GCRG, and sort of the rest went on from there. And my first river trip was a guides training seminar. I hiked down the hike into the trip at Phantom, and I kid you not, within the first trip, the first hour, we flipped in hermit. And so, I guess you could say I was just immersed in the resource, like from the very beginning. And it's gone on from there. And it's been one of the most amazing things of my life to be introduced to a community. And when I say community, I don't mean just river guides, but I mean the broader community of all of us, commercial river guides, private boaters, Park Service, tribal representatives, the larger Grand Canyon community, and be able to work collaboratively over the years on really important things. And it's just been such a positive experience and a huge learning experience in my life. I learn new things all the time. And so, and that's what we love to do at GCRG, is also, you know, as an educational organization, be able to share that learning. So, so anyway, I didn't know, you know, before I came to Flagstaff, that this would be such, you know, it would help define me and a place that I love and people that I love. And that's what it says to me, is that I just truly feel deeply about the place and the people, and I always will.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Lynn. Next, we'll turn it over to Shada. Nikki.
Let's see, my connection, I'm sure you've read some stories that were written or recorded, but some of you have heard it in person, those who I've been on trips with. I like this story because in the Indigenous Navajo way, we always do introductions. We always say, where are you from? Who are you? What is your clan? And that is why these introductions are so important. And I've always said that, even as a scientist, Western science, I'm trained into Western science, scientific method. And then in Navajo, when someone asks you, where are you from? And then first they'll say, what's your clan? Then they can pinpoint where you're from. And they'll call you grandmother, nephew, but there's no term for friend or colleague or anything like that. It's all about family. But in the Navajo way too, our umbilical cord, when it falls off your baby's body, you bury it at a certain place. And mine is in the sheep corral at our parents' home back in Shanto. And I'm drawn back to that place quite a bit. And I feel like part of it, maybe they even sprinkled it in other places, because I was really drawn to the canyon. And even our grandmother Ruth, would tell us stories about how before I was born, that I was blessed with songs and prayers and stories about our people. And that includes the Grand Canyon. And even in areas in New Mexico I haven't seen. I was blessed with those stories before I even came out of my mother's womb. And yeah, you know, as I mentioned, that the water is a lifeline. You know, just like the way the blood, we have veins running through our body, that's the same way for our mother, the earth. The waters are her, literally, that's her blood, her lifeline. And so the first time I think I really visited the Grand Canyon when my uncle was a ranger at the Grand Canyon, and I was so bored, I didn't want to be there because it was unfamiliar with me, because we were in the pine trees and I was not used to that. And but it was fun to see my uncle, because he's the one that also helped raise me. But that was the last time. And you'll hear a lot of people say, I've lived in Flagstaff forever, but I've never been to the Grand Canyon or taken advantage of going there. You know, as when I was younger, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of transportation to go anywhere. So that was a big part of it. But I knew the stories about it before I even went there. And lastly, I'll say I give major credit to two women. I'm gonna get emotional, in my life, and a lot of you are familiar with them. My friend Laura Colton, I don't know where she is, hiking somewhere, but she's the one that took me on my first river trip. And it was like I was home, like I never left, and I never looked back. And I'm getting emotional because our friend Kristen Harned, some of you may know her as Husinga, but Kristen Harned is the one that also trained me down there. And she taught me how to read rapids and all that stuff. And I've always felt the same. I mean, I always felt at home there. But those are two women I give big props to. And a lot of you attendees are very familiar with those two amazing women that helped me on the journey to becoming a commercial river guide and whatnot. And a lot of you know what it feels like to be down there. You talk about this feeling that you get in your gut and your soul. And like Amy said, she just dreams about it and she feels it. And I think I fell off the bed last month because I was dreaming of going through Hermit Rapid, Lynn. And I dream about it once in a while and I really do miss it. But I know that I'm, I'll go see it again, but there's more important stuff for me to do up on the rim. So with that, I'll pass it on. So that's my connection to the land, not just the Grand Canyon, but because we're specifically talking about the Grand Canyon here. So yeah, I don't know what you.
Yeah, Shada, and for sharing that. And there was a question from somebody about how many people are attending. We have about 173 people attending. And so I asked also if people can chat or put in the chat box where people are tuning in from. So we have people from Maryland, from Tucson, from North Carolina, Minnesota, and just want to acknowledge all of you for tuning in, and also to Shada for sharing your connection to this place, because it has a lot of meaning and we all have our different connections in our experience to this place, or to the waters, or to, even if you've never even been there, you have or down into the canyon, you've seen it from the rim and in different ways. And so just thank you for sharing that. And lastly, I'll have Jack share his experience with the canyon.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I kind of always have to originate to the fact that I am, half Anglo and then half Hopi. And I guess growing up, it kind of was always and still is walking that fine line between those two worlds. So growing up, we always been camping with my family at the Grand Canyon and everything, but I didn't really appreciate or acknowledge the cultural significance that it had. So I guess as I grew older, my dad started telling me some of these things, some of these stories about Sipapumi and how we emerged from that place into this world that we live in now, from down under, because other worlds became corrupt, and how, ancestors, when we die, we go back to the canyon, and how kind of what Nikki was saying, the river is the lifeblood of Mother Earth, and the foliage and all the plants and trees are kind of like the hair and skin, and then the animals are our guides. So when we die, the animals show us the way to our ancestors into these worlds that we will then dwell. So I mean, that kind of really painted the picture for how I view the canyon now. And then when I got involved in the Intertribal Centennial Conversations group, which I will I will go into a little more later, I definitely got to go to the Grand Canyon a lot more, and I definitely established this reverence for the Grand Canyon and really started to appreciate it as this healing place. And so now I view it as such a different place as I once did. So I just feel really honored to have that perspective. And as I grow, I learn more about my tribe, about my culture, and all these things are just relevant and they kind of add on to the significance. So, I mean, I just consider myself really lucky to live in this beautiful place, to be tied to these, cultural values, and inherit this significant knowledge of Indigenous presence. And so I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation and just kind of get to know myself and everybody else more with how we can go forward and just kind of bring this knowledge back to the canyon, bring our people back to the canyon, and all kind of develop this situation where we can all have a collective part in respecting and thriving together.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Speaking of, before we move into a little bit more about the Intertribal Centennial Conversations group and the work that some of y'all are doing, there was I think there was a poll question for you all as well about your relationship to the canyon. Is that right? I don't know if that was a question or not. Yes, we do have it up. So if you all can add to your experience, to your connection to the canyon as well. I know we don't have all the answers on there. If it's other, you can feel free to elaborate in the chat box. We would like to know if you're comfortable sharing that. And I want to pull up a PowerPoint after this poll ends and share an audio clip from some of the voices that was recorded from the, I think it was the Grand Canyon Conservancy's hiking guides training seminar about a year ago. So I wanted to share that as well. All right, give it a few more seconds. For those tuning in on the phone, some of the answers are work, recreational, spiritual, science, home, or others. So the question was, again, what is your relationship to the canyon? So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results so everybody can see it. So this recreational, 64%. So, and work is next at 51, and then spiritual at 44%. So thank you for taking the time to share your relationship to the canyon. And I'm gonna pull up my screen. Let's see, PowerPoint, sorry. Okay, can you all see my screen? Great. All right, so I just put together this short PowerPoint. Thank you, Amy Martin, for some of the photos I'll be using. So again, the title of this panel, Beyond the Conversation of the Pandemic, speaking a little bit about Indigenous sovereignty and inherent rights to the canyon. And this is an article that came out, as I mentioned earlier, about the hiking guides training seminar and some of the work that the Intertribal Centennial Conversations group is doing. And so I don't know if you all know if you're listening in, that the Grand Canyon National Park, celebrated their 100th year in 2019 as a park. And for some of us, we don't see it as a celebration, and we see it more as because this place and the people that have inhabited this region and this area is longer, way longer than 100 years. And so I wanted to share that with you all and see if I can pull up this audio clip for you guys to listen in on. Where is it at? Oh, there's Jason Nez, there's another one. Okay, so I'm just gonna play it.
Including my own. This is
a opens with a Havasupai prayer.
Can you all hear that okay?
Mm-hmm. Casca and Jack Pongyesva of Hopi are here to speak about Indigenous views of the canyon.
To a lot of tribes, including my own, this is a church in some sorts. And so I think it's really important to let people know that it
consider the Grand Canyon part of their cultural and spiritual traditions, including Havasupai, Hopi, Navajo, Zuni, and Paiute. Pongyesva is part of an initiative called Intertribal Centennial Conversations.
It's basically an opportunity for natives to kind of reclaim their ancestral homelands using this centennial, which kind of marks the anniversary of 100 years of being excluded from the national park for natives, and flipping it into a way to kind of integrate native presence back into the park.
The first step is to add native names onto park signs and maps. Many visitors hike the Bright Angel Trail, but Casca says they don't know it's an old Havasupai path.
The Bright Angel Trail, our people call Kafatbehe, and that's because of the trees, because of the way that their branches are, or the leaf part of it, is how my dad explained it to me. Kafatbehe, and that's Coyote Tail Trail, because it's kind of bushy at the end.
The next goal is to work with the Park Service to hire more native guides, artists, and entrepreneurs. Nikki Cooley was the first Navajo woman to work as a licensed commercial river guide in the Grand Canyon.
I felt very alone in that respect, that I didn't see a lot of brown people on the river.
Cooley says many of her guests on river trips thought of Native Americans as a vanished race or a Hollywood stereotype. She fought those misconceptions by telling Navajo stories.
You know, you get your water from the earth, you get your food from the earth, and you get your strength from the deities, the holy people who reside in these places, because they came long before you, so you could be here enjoying it, but also carrying on that tradition of not treating it just as a playground.
The Intertribal Group's third goal is to involve the tribes at higher levels of management and policy. Jason Nez is a Navajo archaeologist. He says Native culture and environmental protection are closely linked, but parks were founded on a false idea of untouched wilderness.
And they've used that myth against Native people. They've used it to keep us out of participation in management. They've used it to keep us out of park areas where we've lived for time immemorial.
No national park has a model for restoring Native presence, so the Grand Canyon is leading the way. Serena Riggs of the Navajo Nation is part of the Intertribal initiative. She says it won't be easy. The Centennial celebration is a reminder of past wrongs.
What is there to celebrate? You know, do we celebrate the Trail of Tears? Do we celebrate the long walk of Navajo and Apache?
But Riggs says the Centennial has also awakened something in tribal nations, a new commitment to make their voices heard and share their experiences. For Riggs, the canyon is a spiritual place, not a tourist destination.
It's not just rock. You can feel energy coming off of it. You can feel that it's alive.
Her hope is from now on, the Grand Canyon's 6 million annual visitors will have a chance to see it that way too. For KNAU, I'm Melissa Sivany in Flagstaff at a training.
All right, great. So I just wanted to share that because it includes a few more perspectives about, you know, some of the members, some of the tribal members that have been involved in these conversations about possibly changing the names on the maps or on the trails, or even referring to Indian gardens instead, to view it as Havasupai gardens, you know, and that this place is not just a recreational, you know, it's not just used for recreation, it's beyond, you know, beyond that. And so with that, I want to turn over to Jack to talk a little bit about the work that he's involved in with the tribal members on the ICCG group.
All right, so yeah, I've been very lucky to be brought in on from the ground floor and help establish this program. And so what we did is in 2018, you know, with plans and our aim to confront the centennial anniversary of the park, like was mentioned in that news segment, we gathered tribal members that were community leaders, environmental advocates, and just all around great people from the 11 associated tribes of the Grand Canyon. And what we did is we hosted 8 meetings throughout the year 2018, and we kind of had open-ended forum conversations on how do you see the canyon, what stories have you heard about the canyon, what have your relatives said about the Grand Canyon National Park and the canyon in general, and then how do you see it now, what are your opinions on it now, and then what would you like to see in the next 100 years and beyond to come. So that was kind of the basis of our conversation. Of course, we honed in on different talking points as we developed our situation, our program. And from there, I was brought in to take the notes from the conversations, which were vast in number. There was a lot of suggestions, and I tried my best to capture all of the you know, informed comments that the tribal members made. And we were just really fortunate to get a great group of tribal members. Great people, really vocal about these problems and some of these injustices they see, or just issues they had with the park in general. And I think that was key in developing such a strong platform and founding document going forward. So what we did is we compiled a document which is about 14 or 16 pages now, and we kind of categorized all the suggestions into 3 different action item categories, which were education, economic development, and stewardship. Education being the first one, more short term, and that would be to just create awareness within the park, try to, establish connections and relationships with interpretive staff, hiking guides, river guides. And through that, we were able to work with National Park Service and actually do presentations at the park, at the Shrine of Ages building. And that's where that KNAU segment just came from, was one of our program events, like Colleen had mentioned. So we established that educational, start of the stretch. And so we were really doing a lot of, great presentations. We were inviting a lot of our Centennial conversation members to come in and share their past, share their knowledge, trying to break it up to different tribes. So tribal members from each, as many of the tribes that we could get in the segment of each event. And just kind of described our program and just let them know, what we would like them to know, the contemporary Native Americans still exists. This is how, we live, we adapt, and we still see the canyon as a very special and sacred place. And so that was the beginning of our educational program. I mean, we could go on for days and years about how we can integrate these in different ways, but that's definitely the start. And we're now starting to establish a curriculum that we can share with different interpretive staff and guides in the Grand Canyon, so there'll be a more concrete structure for that to go forward. The second one would be economic development, and that would be basically trying to integrate Native communities, Native tribal members, as far as entrepreneurs, artists, artist coalitions, small businesses into the Grand Canyon economy, thus trying to create a situation where there is a more equitable and progressive share of the Grand Canyon economy in general, because there are so many visitors and everything. So we thought that, some of these entrepreneurs that we talked to would really, it'd be great for them to get into the Grand Canyon economy and hopefully Grand Canyon Village and just be associated. And so Grand Canyon has done a great, job at really trying to plan a summit with us that was unfortunately postponed because of COVID-19. But through the Desert View Project, we've really been working well and really having great conversations forward. And there's been just great relations all around. And then, so that would be the more long-term action item. And the third one would be stewardship. And that's a little down the road. So once we establish those 2 other action item categories and all those goals and objectives we'd like to establish, we would then move towards stewardship, which would be creating, different councils of tribal members that can, help implement management strategies on the land, hopefully, fire suppression through indigenous techniques and ecological knowledge. And then hopefully maybe something like a tribal river council, where we can kind of just work with outfitters and kind of get, guides, the knowledge and information, the appropriate teachings that we would like to at least just people to be aware with that go down the canyon, so that they can know that, acknowledge the land and know that indigenous peoples have been there for thousands of years and that we call it, our ancestral homeland. So that's a little bit about our program. Right now, like I said, our summit, our economic summit, which was supposed to take place from June 1st to June 4th. So a couple weeks ago at Albright Training Center, was postponed. We're hoping to do some kind of virtual summit in the fall to kind of keep the momentum going and everything. But that's the program in a nutshell. We've come a long way, and I'm just really happy to have been a part of it. It was a really groundbreaking program in my eyes. We did borrow some of the strategies and the overall, structure from a bigger program that was the forefront of everything, which was the Colorado Plateau Intertribal Conversations. But that just kind of deals with more, issues obviously around the Colorado Plateau. So we focus more on the Grand Canyon and the 11 associated tribes, which include Hopi, Hualapai, Havasupai, Zuni, Navajo, Yavapai, Apache, San Juan Southern Paiute, Las Vegas Paiute, Moapa Paiute, Kaibab Paiute, and the Paiute of Utah. So that in a nutshell is kind of the program.
Great. Thank you for that, Jack, and all the work that you're doing, and of course, all the tribal members that are involved in these important conversations. And as you all see on the slide, I mean, the conversation sometimes is about, you know, boundaries, right? And so I think that's part of why we wanted to do this panel as well, is talk about some of these boundary issues. And I think as sometimes for us as Indigenous peoples, we see it as invisible boundaries, even though there's park boundaries, state boundaries, private land, you name it. There's so many boundaries out there. And of course, these maps do not represent, the one on the left side does not represent all the tribes, Indigenous people that have come to this region, migrated through here, have called this place home, and you know, continue to have that connection and their own stories to the canyon. So we just want to point that out as well. I know the map on the left, somebody had brought up, you know, why isn't Ute included? So that's why I wanted to say that. Thank you for bringing more, you know, doing this important work, Jack. So what's the next one? I think, is that it? So I'm gonna stop sharing for now and just talk about, if I can ask the panel to talk about another topic around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoor industry, in environmental advocacy groups, in your communities. And I know, especially, you know, at the beginning of the panel, if in case you joined later, for some of the people joining in out there, I kind of talked about the Black Lives Matter, you know, excuse me, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, Indigenous Lives Matter, and all the what's happening out there with racial injustices and issues, and it continues on. You know, some it comes close to home for us, and so and since then, you know, as I mentioned, there's some committees, you know, organizations that are really making those bold statements about we support, you know, this movement, but not really elaborating on how. So if we can maybe touch on that if you want, and if you feel comfortable with that, maybe your experience around that, maybe you've been asked to be part of that conversation in different spaces, or what can be done, you know, for the people out there listening. So if it's okay, Amy, I will start with you. And also a reminder to everybody in the audience, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box and we'll try to get to it. Hoping to go maybe through maybe 6:30. Hopefully we can end by then. So we have about half an hour, but we might end early as well. So go ahead, Amy.
Okay, thanks again. What I would like to start with is that really my perspective of Grand Canyon changed so much on some of my first river trips in the early 2000s with Shanna Wadahamaji, who was a Havasupai guide for the Park Service. And she really, you know, she taught me that the canyon is a living and breathing entity that deserves our respect, and that ceremony comes with that, and that there's no separation, you know, between us and the physical being of the canyon and the ecological being. And I just wanted to really acknowledge her in this conversation and note that she was such, you know, a pivotal person for me, and also, you know, just express how much I miss her. I know a lot of you knew her as well, and yeah, I'm just so grateful that she played such a, you know, large role in my life and so many other people's lives in the canyon. And so a lot of where I come from on these issues was sparked from knowing her, listening to her, and then wondering why, you know, there were not, you know, more people like her in the canyon, and seeing that, you know, her family, who had been physically removed from the canyon, were then put in Supai Camp, which for those of you that don't know is a place on the South Rim in the park, but kind of hidden away, and that, you know, didn't get running water until I think it was 2010, so 10 years ago, which is kind of, you know, unheard of from that side. But you know, that's just where I'm coming from. I'm just a single person. I'm learning every single day. I am not an expert on anything. I've learned so much, you know, already, and I just want to be ears, learning more and helping to disseminate information in the correct way. So please let me know if there's anything that, you know, any way that I can better my approach to the advocacy piece. And so with that, I'll start with these pieces of action that, you know, that that I'm taking, and again, let me know if these are the best ways to go about it. But I do think that with this heightened awareness of all these racial imbalances nationally, and with organizations and individuals asking what they can do, you know, at this time, there is this great opportunity. And I will say that again, this is a great opportunity to you know, be introspective of ourselves if we work for organizations, look at the structure of these organizations and see what we can do to be more inclusive of these, you know, of diverse voices, and of voices that more accurately represent this community that we live in the community of Grand Canyon, the community of Flagstaff. I feel like there has been so much exclusion over time, especially in the recreation, outdoor recreation area that I've worked in, as well as in the Park Service. So I guess some of these things, like, you know, some of these changes, they're not really comfortable, and we just, you know, it's so easy for us to stay in our old comfortable ways. But as I said, if there's ever a time, that time is now. And we're past the time of planting, you know, these small seeds. We've been doing that for decades. This is now a time for this radical change. And this is happening across the country. Local governments, the federal government, corporations, organizations, they are changing the structure of how they work. And we can do that too. We can do that with our organizations here. So that's what I am going to encourage people to do, is be introspective and look for those changes. Another thing that we can do, you know, is we can create that space to amplify these voices. And I think that we've started doing that, you know, with the DTS talks, with the media, with all this stuff, with one-on-one conversations. You know, I think we are starting to create space, but that's not enough. Some of these women on this panel that I know and that I love, they are the most hardworking women. They are the busiest women I know. And so every time that we ask them to step forward and speak and educate us, they are, you know, we're draining them even more, and it's exhausting. So we really need to take the initiative and take the responsibility to educate ourselves and to find that information and read through and get that accurate history, and not only the history, but what's happening, you know, in contemporary times, what the current issues are, so that we're not asking, you know, these amazing women and men to do the work for us. We can do that ourselves. A couple other things. Sorry, I hope let me know if I'm getting too long-winded here. I just have a couple.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Another thing that we can do that I found is that we can stand by our words and, you know, stand up if we do hear, you know, misinformation out there. We can stand up even if it's uncomfortable for us, even if we feel like it's going to alienate us from our peers. Like, we need to be the ones to take that responsibility and stand up and get that correct information out there. And we also need to be, you know, completely transparent transparent as why we're saying things. And so some of the things that I've seen are that sometimes organizations, specifically recreation organizations surrounding Grand Canyon, that are not necessarily have a lot of diversity within them, they use the Native perspective to push their own agenda. And I see that, I've seen it with the confluence issue, where many of these organizations and individuals say, we support the tribes, we support protection of these sacred areas for the tribes. But then in the next breath, they are pushing to open up Havasu, even though the Havasupai tribe is trying to protect themselves from the current pandemic. They're saying, pushing to open up Deer Creek, even though that has been asked to be closed. And so when we do this, we need to be genuine with our voices. We need to say, okay, we're supporting the tribes, and we are supporting the tribes through all of this, and not using that to push what we want, both as individuals and as organizations. And that's hard. It's hard, but we need to. I mean, honestly, it's really not that hard, to be truthful. We just need to be, good, open, honest people.
Yes.
Okay, I might too much. Like, stop.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
no. I think all your ideas and action items are great, Amy, from your perspective and what you've seen in the past and heard. And it's true, we've all seen what's happened with the notice from Havasupai to ask the guiding community to not stop at Havasu Canyon or even at the confluence. And so that really created a lot of maybe some controversy amongst, different individuals, guides, educators, community members. And so that's, part of this conversation too. And none of us can speak on behalf of the tribe, but we wanted to just acknowledge that. And this is why part of why we're having that conversation as well. And that we showed that map as well for, and recognizing the traditional use lands and homelands of, the indigenous peoples in this area that's continued to inhabit within the canyon as well. So I want to see if Jewel can provide her perspective.
Oh, I guess I'm not on mute. Okay. When I think about diversity, when I think about inclusion, I think about the female river runners, the Native female river runners. There's not that many, and maybe that goes back to not being included in the outdoor scene and hiking and all these outdoor sports and activities. I've never really knew that they were open or didn't see someone that looked like me kayaking down the Grand Canyon or rock climbing or hiking the Appalachian Trail. So I didn't see that growing up. Me becoming a river guide came from my family, came from my aunt, my uncle, my older brother, my brothers, I should say, of being a river runner. And, and it gave me great joy to see other women on the river when they would be pulling into Diamond Creek. Every time I said, it's a great thing to see women on the river. I know earlier I said that, Georgie White is not my hero, but I respect what she did and for opening those spaces for women. But Indigenous women need to be involved as well. And I guess in my mid-20s, I didn't really start exploring the outdoors recreationally. As a Native person, we've always had our traditional lands that we've hunted on and, raised livestock on. But recreationally, that's something I never really did. And so when I look at hiking, or when I look at rock climbing or kayaking these different rivers, you know, they have these names after non-native pioneers, you know, the John Muir Trail or the Appalachian Trail, or all these different names, you know, of different points in the Grand Canyon. And it kind of frustrates me that I don't know the indigenous names to these places. And that's where indigenous voices are erased, is that, you know, these names, they have a name, an indigenous name, you know, respected to the local tribes around them. And so, you know, when we talk about being included, you know, in these conversations, you know, listen to the indigenous people around who know these names and who want to rename. I think I've heard of talks of wanting to rename Indian gardens to Havasupai gardens. Let's do that, because it is their traditional homeland, and it's a start. Is it going to fix everything? No, but it's a start. And when it comes to, you know, our Native American or indigenous people's homelands, that we do consider sacred, you know, where our origin stories come from, and they are under attack. The Red Butte of the Havasupai, the uranium mines that they want to open up in the Grand Canyon, the contaminated waters that, you know, go into these indigenous communities, and the cleanup is not there. It's, you know, when we raise these issues, that's where we want your support. That's where we want your allies. That's where we want your solidarity with us, to stand with us, to invite us to the table, you know, to hear our perspectives. And, you know, and this also goes on the indigenous community as well, is that, you know, we need to be on watch of anything that affects our traditional lands, and be there to speak up for, you know, the next generation, for the elders before us. And so, you know, we are here, we're here to stay, you know, we will, you know, be here in the generations to come. And, you know, change is happening. You know, I think we see it in the country every day. And, you know, with technology, you know, being able to provide the space for myself and others, and for, you know, the community to hear it. And so, you know, we have a chance to make change. And so, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jewel, and talking from your own experience as a female, but also as a river guide as well. I think that's really important, and to support each other in that way. There was a question for Jack earlier about the work that you're doing. The question is, have you asked any of the 11 tribes for help and support in achieving your goals?
So yeah, basically, we haven't asked the tribal governments yet, because one of the reasons is that we wanted to do this from a community level and a grassroots standpoint. So we do acknowledge that in the future, there will be more government to government relationships. But one of the few things that we did talk about and establish in the very beginning was we wanted to make a point that this is grassroots oriented, because, I mean, take a look at, for example, the Hopi tribe. You know, there are 7 out of 12 villages that do not prescribe to the tribal government, and they're pretty much autonomous from the autonomy that the tribal nation has. So it gets a little confusing, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that even though tribal governments may function in a way that benefits the people, sometimes that benefit doesn't make its way all the way to the people once it's implemented. So one of the things that we really wanted to do was make sure that we come at this from a community-oriented standpoint, and so we can actually really benefit the people instead of possibly the tribal governments and some people. So later on, yes, we probably will work more with the tribal governments and all the tribes. But right now, what we did is and are doing are working with these community leaders and advocates from these tribes as tribal members. Some of them who have been on council or worked at the park and different things like that. But you know, right now we're really trying to come at it from that level. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for that. There was another question that came in before we turn back to the topic on diversity, equity, inclusion. This one, someone is asking about how can one help if they don't live near the canyon, but have respect for the canyon and want to support the indigenous tribes who live there. I don't know if one of you want to answer, or I'll pick somebody to answer. Sure, Raechel, go ahead.
Well, one of the most important ways I believe of supporting diversity is through the Grand Canyon youth. And one, having had that experience as a 11-year-old kid, was so life-changing, and it still is at the base of so much. Every time I still go to the canyon, I still always remember being 11 years old down there. And I also see by diversifying the kids who can come to the Grand Canyon and having access is really, really important, because I've come to believe that if you're a kid who's having exposure to scientists, to cultural advocates and traditional elders or people in your community, you're more likely to go on into the field of being a resource management, cultural ambassador. Having worked with like Carrie Cannon, I really, with the Hualapai tribe, and Phyllis Hogan with the Supai people, it's like that plant knowledge, and also our friends and sisters like Kate Waters and Kristen Huizinga. There's different people who are such incredible bridges, and when some of them are no longer with us, it's like, who's the bridge, and who are the kids, and also stewards and mentors to these young people. I think it was about over 12 years ago that we did a tribal youth trip. That I'd like to know is like, who is the sponsor of one of those kids to be at an actual river guide 12 years later, you know, so then they could also be taking it forward to the next kids. And that's that thing is like, we just still don't really see that diversity on the boardrooms or some of the programming. And I think that's what we kind of saw in this Facebook post that for me was really unbelievable. And I guess that's why I jumped in, because I felt, how can we be advocates for nature but not advocate for the peoples of the Grand Canyon, you know? So I think that's what inspired me to kind of jump in. But I really feel it's like the youth or some, you know, how do we get more of those kids to have that experience, and then have mentors who might actually graduate them into becoming part of the river community, so, and businesses, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And also maybe as a photographer and artist, I've done a lot of work with the Sierra Club to help make presentations that can actually kind of go further to different places across the country. But I think a lot of people really do not know very much about the indigenous peoples and their stories of Grand Canyon. It's sort of like a big leap, you know, where all the borders kind of stop at the reservation, and we end up kind of learning more about John Wesley Powell, but we have a very minimal awareness of the tribal history and contemporaneous stories. So that's something maybe we can all work towards as representatives together. And I know that Sister Dawn Kish has joined in the house, but you know, some of that work that she and Resnes and the park, you know, like those collaborative ways of working together, I think are really, really important. And for the, you know, fostering that with the next generation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Raechel. I want to turn it over to Shada Nikki if you have some thoughts on the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know you've shared some of your experience as a guide when you were guiding on the river, but you can also share what you feel comfortable sharing. Thank you.
I have to jump up. Well, I guess I have a lot to say on this topic, and I think I'm tired of just being a bystander for a long time, because frankly, my children are more important than anything. So when you say diversity, inclusion, and equity, okay, to me, that doesn't mean just creating a program that has those in the program name and then be run by an all Caucasian staff, okay? Or your board of directors are all Caucasian, or don't have experience with in the tribal indigenous world, meaning maybe living there, I mean, there's John O'Brien, who I'll just call out. I don't know if he's on here, but he's a guide for Azra, and he grew up in Tuba City, and he knows the perspectives of them. He doesn't share it like he's talking for them, but he does know a lot about them. Diversity, equity, and inclusion also doesn't mean it's short term. It's continual, it's long term, and it's a meaningful exchange between, the clients, the outfitters, and the guides, and most importantly, I think, is the indigenous people and whatnot. And a while back, I was part of a group called Native Voices on the Colorado River, and it was funded by GCROA, Grand Canyon River Outfitters Association, and we did some amazing stuff. And they had the opportunity, should I say, to make it long-term. But then, as I said, if you've all seen my Facebook post, that they just said we weren't needed anymore. So that right there is short-term. It has to be long-term, it has to be meaningful. And I'll give you a good example of who's done that is the Grand Canyon Conservancy. They used to be known as Grand Canyon Association. And I'm calling them out because I used to be a board member. And my time, I think I spent 6 long years with them. And I say long because I was raising my child, Ella Ruth. She grew up with the whole board, and they actively are recruiting people of color and Native Americans, indigenous people. They have actively and continue to fundraise to provide funds. They're the official philanthropist. Okay, they're the official partner for the Park Service, basically, to help raise funds for whatever the Park Service projects need. So they help raise money for Desert Watchtower. They bring in all these different artists and people to share their culture and sell their wares. There's Mather's Point. They did that. I was a part of that. And they asked my opinion, and they asked all the tribes' opinions. And it's all included in there. All 11 tribes that deem the Grand Canyon culturally, spiritually significant are included in there, okay? So I feel I was not a token Indian. And when I say that, I don't say it lightly. When I did my PhD work, I don't have my PhD. I left for the reason that I felt like I was just a checklist. So it's up to there. I see a lot of, maybe they have left. I see a lot of managers, maybe some owners of outfitters, and just take that initiative. Don't depend on National Park Service mandates that force you to say, okay, you have to learn about Native culture. Your guides have to learn about it. But then the Park Service is not very clear on what that means. It has to be, you can set that precedent of what that means in working with Grand Canyon Trust, the Intertribal Conversations group. I apologize, I got the name wrong. You have a female river guide right there in front of you, outfitter, Jewel and whatnot. maybe I'll help, but but there's a lot of up and coming river guides that are female, or we don't even know they're river guides yet, or they're going to be guides yet. They're out there. We have to give them that opportunity. And I'll end with this. The most meaningful actions a river guide has taken was a friend of mine who is a motorboatman. And I'm not going to call his name because I'm not sure he would like it, but just because he's a private person. He was really willing to train anybody who was interested in learning about the river. And he would save I think it was his swamper or assistant spots for a Native American that I recommended. And I think we got to 2 or 3 of them, and then they kind of petered out because I eventually had to leave due to other circumstances and whatnot. So he actively did that. No other person, I don't think, did that. Kristen did that for me and whatnot. And but yeah, so please do that. And that's what that means to me. And I will be super blunt. Your board of directors needs to be more diverse. And that doesn't mean putting a checkbox again and saying, okay, we asked, but it didn't work. We asked, but they didn't say it. I need that to be meaningful. We need that to be meaningful. Everybody on this panel, everybody in the attendee list, and being on there. And this may not be, people may not want to hear this, but they need to. And I'm finally speaking out because I'm just pretty sick of, staying quiet. But also supporting our relatives who need us. And you see, right now, I'm getting very emotional. This is an emotional topic for a lot of us. And so please, it's not just a physical interaction. It's not just a paycheck that you have with the Grand Canyon. I still have friends up to 90 years old that have went on river trips 20 years ago. Throughout the 20 years, I was an assistant and a river guide that I still keep in touch with. They say I made a meaningful impact, and now they support all causes and whatnot. So please, with that, I think I'll pass it on. But that's I think somebody said I'm speaking my truth now. So thank you for giving me that time. Yeah.
It is. It's an emotional conversation because first it's coming from our experience, but also because we care. We're passionate about this, and this is why we brought this panel up. It is why we brought these voices to this conversation. Why we want you to be involved in this conversation as well, because you all have your own experience and things to add to this, and your own experience and the difficulties that you might have had to go through yourselves, whether you've been a guide or used as a token or tried to advocate for these voices, and with the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's okay to get emotional about this, but that we can all be in this together. And that, I from what I've heard from my sister and others, that they've been trying to provide that voice for 10 plus years, and this is why my sister had started, as some of you know, to get more Native guides in the canyon, but also on the San Juan River as hiking guides. I went through that program 10 years ago and decided to get my license to be a guide on the San Juan River. And even 10 years ago, I was also the only Navajo river guide on one of the few on the San Juan River myself. But now we have a number of Indigenous guides that are on the San Juan River. And so it's slowly changing. But as Nikki pointed out, some of the action, what some of the companies and outfitters can do, these are some steps you can take. Don't just make that statement, take action, to actually follow through with some of those things that you're stating and want to do. And I know this panel does not include all the voices that we want to include in the conversation, but this is what we could put together within a week's notice. And I just really want to thank all the panelists for sharing their perspectives, their experience, their ideas, and their thoughts, and also for all of you joining and tuning in, whether it's by the computer, through your iPad, your phones. We really appreciate the very well, I mean, the really good turnout. I didn't think it was going to spark this much interest. So even that, you can see this conversation is really important because of how many people have tuned in as well. So I don't know if anyone wants to share any last thoughts before we close out this panel. I know we didn't get to some of the questions that you all asked, but hoping we can answer them maybe via email after the webinar has ended. So with that, if anybody from the panel wants to add any last thoughts to this conversation before we close out, I'll turn it to you. Jack?
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks to all the panelists. Like I said, I was really put on this panel as a last minute addition in place of Serena. And, you know, I've learned so much from her, and she's such a respected person and woman of Indigenous power. And I think one of the things that we all talk about, and maybe not focus directly on, but has kind of come to light lately, as I've been working with one of the outfitters and trying to increase Indigenous awareness, is that, you know, we're all kind of learning right now. We're all in this learning period where, you know, tribes right now are trying to figure out what the best, most appropriate way to do cultural tourism is. If we're able to get back to a tourist economy that resembles somewhat what it used to be. But, you know, and so I think this is a time for all of us to kind of look forward and learn from each other and learn together on how we can kind of establish this path forward and how we can do it together, and really just raise awareness, create a conversation, and just make sure we're all included in this. You know, we're all one people in the end, and you know, we all bleed red. And so I just think that it's important to kind of harness that togetherness in order to pave this way forward that we can really incorporate everyone's voice, everyone's happiness, everyone's sorrows, everyone's, you know, emotions, and really just be one people as people who really appreciate the sacred and special place. I guess that's all I want to add.
Thank you. Thank you for joining this panel at the last minute, Jack. Your voice is definitely important, and your perspective as well. So anyone else? Lynn?
Hi.
Real quick, for some people that are asking on the chat box about the recording and any resources, on the flyer, you saw that there was 2 links on there. One link was to register, and then there was another link for resources. So I'm putting together a Google Drive folder of some resources that might be helpful within that folder. And if you have any resources to share or have access to, please send those as well. And also this webinar has been recorded, and so that will also be sent out via email, and we'll have it available. So go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah. I just wanted to say how appreciative, deeply appreciative I am to be on this panel and to be able to hear everybody's voices and the openness and the heart with which they've spoken. It's really meaningful. And sorry, choked up, but anyway, just know that for GCRG's part, you know, we're looking both internally and externally at ways that we can evolve and build on a foundation, but just take it farther. It really needs to go farther, but we're not presuming that we know best how to do that. And so that's why forums like this, as well as you know, we'll be reaching out beyond this to to get other perspectives, because we really want to make sure that the decisions that we take and the paths that we take, you know, are with good intention, but also that they get us where we want to go. And so anyway, thank you so much for having us here. And I think Nikki said the other day that this is a teachable moment, and it most certainly is. It's a teachable moment. It's a pivotal moment. And I think and hope that it will really propel all of us forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for joining, Lynn, and providing more information about GCRG's work and what you're doing, and we appreciate it. Sure. Raechel, Jewel, Amy, if you want to add any last thoughts.
I think it was really good to see some of the river companies like Dennis Smolt from Ezra, you know, kind of standing behind supporting the tribe in some of the forums. And maybe that's something as we monitor some of our social media engagement, was just, again, giving that voice to the people who need our support at this time for the canyon. So that was, I think, a pivotal moment in that sharing. And maybe too, is that, you know, we can, I was thinking that with the Whale Foundation, maybe there can be a component with NACA, or how do we help with like also that healthcare, or addressing those same concerns that we see, you know, for the future. So those are a couple things. So thanks again for everybody sharing their perspectives.
Yeah, no, thank you as well, Raechel, for tuning in from Bisbee, Arizona. Jewel, Amy, want to add any last thoughts before we close out? Looks like Amy unmuted.
I did. I just wanted to express my gratitude to everyone for all the efforts that are being done at the canyon, and for all the hard work, and thanks so much for including me.
Okay, thank you, Amy, for joining. And Jewel?
Thank you all, you know, all the panelists for your thoughts, your views, you know, your truths. It was very inspiring to see and hear and listen to, and then also to the community, you know, who joined us. The Grand Canyon, or, you know, Arizona, northern Arizona, the Colorado Plateau, it's everyone's home. We all have a part in this. We all have, we all can take action to help protect that, you know. And when someone asks, you know, what's the best way to support, you know, tribal tribes, you know, when in this time, in the COVID time, you know, when things are safe to open up again, you know, go through tribal towns, go support tribal economy, take a trip down the Grand Canyon with Hualapai River Runners, or with GC9. GC9, Grand Canyon Rapids 9, is owned by Patricia Sespuch, who is a Hualapai woman, who operates her own river outfitting company. And you know, we open our homelands to everyone, you know, and we take pride in that, and we respectfully welcome everyone to come and take view of what is so sacred, what is so grand, what is so special to us, and to share that with you, to share, you know, the indigenous names, the stories, the songs, the languages that come from, you know, the surrounding areas. It's a privilege to hear that. It's a privilege to hear that from an indigenous person. If you're able to go down on a river trip and hear the indigenous stories, the songs of what came, it's really something. It's very special. It's words can't explain it. But again, you know, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And if, as river tours or river trips operate, you know, we ask that, you know, you don't stop at Havasu Canyon. That would be my request to you out there, respectfully. You know, and it will open up again. It will, and you'll have that chance to stop again. But just to respect the wishes and the requests of the tribe along the canyon. So, ma hanikia, thank you.
Thank you, Jewel, for that. And as you were speaking, and then you said that, you know, words can't describe it. I got the chills just you talking about it, because we feel it. We feel it inside of us. And yes, words cannot express how we feel in the way we feel in the canyon, around it, you know. It's just very powerful in our own ways as well. So I don't know if Shada, Nikki wants to add any last thoughts before we close out the panel.
Wasn't enough. No, I'm joking. And I just want to point out that I had some of the most amazing times on the river, and there was a lot of people that were willing to learn, and I want you to continue that spirit and whatnot. And like Jewel said, you know, and Raechel, and actually everyone on here, is just to respect, just a simple request of the people that are more vulnerable than the communities that you come from, and pass that message along to your fellow guides who are unable to be on here, your clients and whatnot. And I would like to see that meaningful exchange on how this can go further, and not have to be told that we're not needed anymore because we have a book written about it or something like that. Like, it has to be. And you river guides know better how, you know best, should I say, of how to convey the message, because I've seen many of you do it so well on river trips, at orientations. You can include it even more, not just like, oh, these are 11 tribes that live here. Who are they? What is their history? What is their tie to Blacktail, to Deer Creek? All of that stuff. You can go a step further. Look at all these resources that you have in front of you right now, and there's many more. And I encourage you to hear it firsthand. And I want to thank the Grand Canyon Trust for continuing that conversation and whatnot. And yes, I would be willing to talk if you have questions, or you just want to talk or not talk. But yeah, so I really appreciate all of you and your comments and your questions. And please do not take what I said for disrespect. One thing I was taught, and we were taught first and foremost, as soon as you could walk and talk and listen, is that you had to respect everyone. And that includes our Mother Earth, you know, Father Sky, and then the rivers, the plants, the animals, and everything, even the sand. They're all living beings to us. So I appreciate it. And back to you.
Oh, Ahihat Shade for your words, and everybody, again, the panelists, to everybody tuning in, to family, relatives, to the wherever you're calling in from. We really appreciate you joining this conversation, and it doesn't stop here. We can continue these conversations and discussions, and we can even maybe organize another panel of different voices to be included. So everybody said it, you know, just be mindful, respectful when you next time visit this place. There are plenty of resources, as Nikki alluded to, and even the people on the panel, they're providing the time, they're putting their time and energy into these resources, and also speaking from their own experience, from their own perspective as well. So it's out there, it's available. So Jack, did you have something, one last thing? Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. I guess that was my fault for going first, but, you know, just touching on, you know, things that everyone said, and especially Nikki, you know, we are all gonna be the first line of defense and the first agents of change. So, you know, as you mentioned as well, Colleen, you know, I mean, we just have the simple ask of, you know, leave some, you know, if you see something that you might think is an artifact, please leave it alone. You know, there's some sacred power that's associated with some of these things and some of these people that have put them there that is it's very hard to understand. You know, I'm starting to learn more, and it's hard for me even to understand. And so I guess, you know, and obviously I hope it goes without saying, you know, respect any petroglyphs or anything like that. You know, please tell your passengers, if you're a river guide, to respect the land. Not, you know, I heard that there was wall structures being built on some of the banks and stuff. Please ask them not to do that. Please ask them not to, you know, rip up plants or take, you know, anything off of the foliage. Obviously, please don't hurt animals. So just simple things like that, you know, as we start creating this conversation, a more inclusive conversation, especially during this time of, you know, social unrest. I think it's important for all of us just to start with little things that we can do. So be very appreciative if, yeah, you guys could take heed of that and maybe just start on those little incremental types of change. So Gwakwai, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, I think we're going to close out. I hope you all have a good evening. Thanks for tuning in. There'll be a follow-up email. And again, thank you I want to give a shout out to Serena. She's an amazing person, sister, partner in crime. I mean, we put this thing together within a week because we care about this place and the work, and about, you know, providing education and awareness to this discussion. So I just want to acknowledge her in this panel and the conversation as well. So with that, have a good evening.
Oh,